And, we were arguing, and so I told her it was a helicopter blinking its landing lights off and on, which I'd never seen anything like that, but I was a scientist, and you explain things. And so we kept driving and kept arguing about it, and it was pretty obvious. And I was arguing, although I didn't know what it was either. But we turned on Route 95, which was the main east, north and south freeway of the East Coast, and we were driving along, and there was woods on one side. And I looked into the woods, and there was this sphere, and it looked like a glass sphere that you could see through, and in the center of it was this light, and it was like it was rotating or something. It kept going through a spectrum of just red and blue, of different shades of red and blue, and I couldn't imagine what it was. It must have been near the ground or sitting on the ground or something, and there was this little bar around it that just sort of was rotating around, and I couldn't figure out what on earth that thing was. And then the inside of the car lit up in green. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And we didn't know anything about UFOs then. And I still thought my sister was crazy, but I couldn't figure out why the inside of our car was green. And I looked around, I couldn't see green anyplace else, and I thought it must be from that thing I was seeing. But it wasn't green either. And so I couldn't figure out what was going on. I mean, like today, you'd think, well, that's a laser. But back in those days, lasers had just come out, and, they were big things in scientific laboratories. They weren't things people shown in people's cars. And so I had no idea what it was. But anyway, after a while, it stopped, and the inside of the car was no longer green. And so we drove on along. And then my sister started yelling at me to pull over because she said the other thing, the white light that was blinking, was going to go over the road. And so, is this interesting?
So did it go over the road and go past you? Did you see a UFO?
Yeah. So I finally pulled over because she was yelling at me, and I pointed my hand out the window, and I was going to say, "See, it's a helicopter, you dingbat," or whatever. And I pointed my arm out, and I saw a meteor way off in the distance, and then right immediately where I saw the meteor, right over the trees, came this big thing. And then I knew my sister was right and I was wrong. What it looked like, it was like a object, and it had 7 square windows, and the inside of it was really well lit, like real bright white light. And it had a little tiny red light on one end, a little tiny green light on the other. It didn't blink, and it was going lengthwise across the road, perpendicular to our line of sight. It wasn't coming toward us, and it was just pretty amazing. And it was blinking in sort of a sequence. The windows were square. And it was like a sequence of, like, the first 3 lights might blink twice, all 7 blink once, the last 4 blink, and then it'd go through that cycle again.
Now, how big was it, Irena? Was it a big size, or smaller craft, or?
I don't know, because it was dark, and we could see it real plain, so I think it was pretty close. And I wouldn't want to really say, because it was just dark, and we could sort of see the profile. I would say it was I don't know, like between 30 or 50 feet or something like that. You just couldn't know. It was real plain, though. I mean, we didn't have any trouble seeing it at all. It was just as obvious as looking in the windows of a house from standing outside. It was real clear.
Now, Irena, did it scare you when you saw something like that? I mean, were you terrified?
Well, what I was thinking was, at the time was, I had a Polaroid camera in the car, and I had high-speed film in my trunk, and I thought, I've got to get a picture of this, because, you know, it looked like a UFO, and I was working for the DIA in photo interpretation, and so I understood things about photographs, and I thought, you know, I'll get a picture of a UFO that nobody could believe. And so I just immediately started thinking about that, and I found my camera in the dark and found the film in the dark, and I had to get the film and the camera while watching this thing. And I was trying to, you know, do it fast, but it takes a while to load a Polaroid with film. And so I finally had it ready to take the picture, and this truck driver pulled over right in front of us and stopped. And I thought, oh, nice, we're going to have another witness. And the truck driver came up and stood right beside me, and he said, what are you doing? And, you know, we were looking at this thing that you couldn't believe, and he asked what we were doing, and so we pointed at it and said, we didn't say UFO or anything like that around a strange man, but, you know, we pointed at it like it was an airplane or something and said, what's that? And he just turned around the opposite direction. He just rotated around and looked in exactly the opposite direction of where it was and said, I don't see anything. And then he turned around and looked at me. At first, you know, I thought he was a normal person, but then I was getting scared. And then he said the same thing again. What are you doing, or what are you looking at, or something? And we pointed again, and he turned around and pointed his head in the opposite direction, just as opposite as you could get, and said, I don't see anything. And then he turned around to us, and he pointed to his head like, you know, gave me a crazy signal, and he went back to his truck and sat there and kept watching us. And so I still wanted to get the picture, but the thing was farther away after he finished, and it was so far away I could just see the one bright light blinking again. I mean, I couldn't resolve the windows. And my sister said later, much later, that around that time it had gotten in a different place all of a sudden, and I didn't realize that. But I wanted to get the picture, and I had high-speed film, and I was afraid I'd get lens flares from the freeway. And so there was a hill, and I ran up the hill, and the hill turned out being bald on top. And I took pictures and came back. And then the thing went over the airport, and it started circling. And it was just circling. That was going in this strange thing where it goes slow and blink twice in one half of a semicircle. And then the other half, it would go so fast you couldn't even see it. And at the time, I heard sounds like a jet or something. I wondered if it was sonic boom or something, or jets. But it turned out there weren't any jets. I found out later there weren't any jets at the airport, but I couldn't quite get the sound to go with the light, and so I don't know what it was. It sounded like a sonic boom or a jet, but whatever it was, I kept hearing it repeatedly. And so then it was circling, and we could see the airplanes up above it, and they weren't landing when it was there. And we both talked about the airplanes and discussed the fact we couldn't hear it. This thing made no sound at all. And talked about the airplanes that weren't landing, and we wondered if they were watching it or if they weren't landing because it was there or what. And then I decided to turn the car around because we were facing south, and I thought it might be going north when it left. I didn't know what direction. We had been following it, and it was going south, but for some reason I thought it was going to go north. And so I got on the freeway to go to the next intersection and turn. Well, the truck driver got right behind us and just drove in right behind us and got right on my bumper and started shining his bright lights in my mirror. And I couldn't see anything. And I didn't know what to do. And at first I thought, maybe I'll stop and ask him what's going on. And I decided not to do that. And I would switch lanes, and he would switch lanes, and he just stayed right behind me. So he was, chasing or following me. And finally I just floored it, going as fast as I could. And I thought I could get away from him because trucks are heavier, but that didn't work either. He just stayed right on my bumper, shining his lights in my car. And I thought we were going to get killed. And I said goodbye to my sister.
Oh, wow.
And the only thing I could figure out to get rid of him would be to go from the left-hand lane and just suddenly, when I came to an intersection, swerve off. And that was real dangerous because somebody was coming on the right-hand lane, faster than us. I would have got killed or have a bad accident or something. But that's what I did. We went through a number of intersections, and finally I swerved off. And I think I lost him. I wouldn't have been able to recognize him anyway. And turned around, came back. And when I came back, the thing was still circling the airport, but it stopped circling and it started going northwest. And so we followed it, but the roads went north and south and east and west. They didn't go northwest, so it was hard. And I didn't know the roads anyway. And so I went north again, and the thing that the thing on it was like on the ground or close to the ground that was shining different colors. It still was, and the inside of the car lit up in green again. And then we followed roads, and finally I got in this real old bumpy road that was gravel with a lot of bumps and everything, and houses a long ways away, and so you couldn't turn around till you got to a driveway. And I was following the thing, but it just kept going a little bit faster than my car would go. And I really wanted to catch up with it and take a picture again or figure out what it was or what. But it was just tearing up my car, and finally I just turned around, went back, and we couldn't find a motel, so we went back to Madison, New Jersey, and stayed in their dorm. And then I went back to Washington. After that, I had a poltergeist experience in Washington, D.C. the next night.
Oh, wow.
So it was a lot of adventures.
It sounds like, hey, Irena, we got to take a break. We got James doing the news on the top of the hour, so we'll be back at 5 minutes after the hour. So if you want to take a break or, get something to drink, get yourself a nice, blanket and get comfy, and we're going to ask you some more questions like, why did you investigate what Calvin Parker's story was, and what did you do with the government, and what really got you into writing books about UFOs and all that. So, hey, just hang tight. I'm going to put you on mute, so don't hang up. We'll be back with Irena Scott here in the next few minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark. I'm Gary, your host, and my co-host tonight is James Christbaum. Check out our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. We'll catch you 5 minutes after the hour.
Okay.
You thirst for some significance of the both dimensional kind. You enter a realm of spirit, of sight and sound and mind. Your radio is a cosmic doorway, and your psyche begins to spark. When you tune in to Gary and the Sun and Night Dreams After Dark.